Hello, everybody. I am Father Deacon Eugene, if we have not met. Hello. So Father Peter gave me a very easy, simple, straightforward topic. It's on angels and demons and the spiritual world. And so it should be fun. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about what angels are and what their role is and what demons are and their role. So we're going to talk about some of the limits and powers of the angels, because they are powerful beings, but we also have to understand that they're limited. Angels are created beings. They're not uncreated. Only God is uncreated. And in Orthodox theology, there's a very strict distinction between the uncreated and the created. God alone is uncreated. Everything else is created. And angels are among those creations. So they came into being through an act of divine will, just like material creation. Angelic nature is therefore not the same thing as the divine nature. The divine nature is possessed only by God. Angels possess an angelic nature. The fathers generally agree that the angels were created before the material creation. There are some fathers who say that they were created on the fourth day with the stars and the luminaries. But generally speaking, the fathers agree they were created before the material creation. So in Genesis 1, when it says God created the heavens and the earth, one of the heavens that he created was the angelic realm. And St. Basil the Great says that the angelic realm, the heaven, is completely filled with the essence of angelic nature, which means that there's no space in the heavens where there's not an angel. When the material creation was added to the immaterial creation, those two realms kind of overlapped. And so now every place you could go is overlapped with this heavenly immaterial creation. So angels are everywhere. Angels are incorporeal. They don't have bodies. They were created in God's image and likeness, the fathers say, which is kind of interesting because we're used to thinking of people as human beings as the only things that are created in God's image and likeness, but the angels also were created in God's image. This is especially the case in that God is incorporeal, meaning he doesn't have a body, despite what some podcasts say, and he is spiritual. And in that sense, angels also are in the image of God in that they don't have bodies. And one time I was trying to explain to my 6-year-old, I think he was 5 at the time though, that angels don't have bodies. And he was like, so they're just a floating head? So, as he grows, I think he'll understand a little bit more. Human beings are also made in the image and likeness of God. And in that sense, we have a relationship with the angels, and that we both are composed of spiritual essence. We call the angels noetic beings, and human beings are also noetic in the sense that we have that immaterial capacity, the immaterial faculty. However, we have the added faculty of the flesh, and angels do not have this. Because they're bodiless, they are not bound by matter and they're not bound by flesh, which is why in our iconography we depict them as having wings, because they're swift. They immediately go from place to place because they're not trapped by the flesh. Which means that angels are extremely dependable and they're swift in our time of need. If we are struggling with temptation, especially temptations of the flesh, angels are readily available for us to call upon to help us to set us free from that temptation. And that's because we share this component with them, this immaterial component. And so, but we also have to remember, so that's the powers of the angels, but they also have limitations. God is the only being that's truly bodiless and incorporeal. When we say that angels are bodiless, we mean we are speaking relatively. Only God is completely bodiless, but angels are limited. And they're extremely vast and powerful, but they are limited. Only God alone is unlimited. He's uncircumscribed, which means he can't be circled. Like there's no place where you can say, there's God, except in the incarnation, but that's a different topic. So angels are relatively incorporeal. Compared to us, they are bodiless. Compared to God, they are dense and slow and contained within space. Angels depend upon God for their existence, for their holiness, and even for their sustenance. St. John of Damascus says, they see God so far as they are capable of doing so. So there's a limit to which even they can see God. And this is why sometimes they're depicted as covering their faces with their wings. They can't look directly at God. And he says that they have this vision of the uncreated light as their food. And so because angels are immaterial, they don't need food, they don't need, to consume matter. Instead, their food is the uncreated light, the light that comes from God, the light that is God. And as Orthodox Christians, we partake of this same light every time we partake of the Eucharist. After we've taken the Eucharist, we say we have seen the true light being God himself. And so this is a light that is ever eaten, yet never consumed, as the priest says in the Divine Liturgy. And this means that another, special relationship we have with the angels is that when we feast upon the flesh and blood of our Lord, we are feasting at the banquet table of the angels. Angels point beyond themselves. There's a tendency in certain circles of our culture, especially like New Age religious traditions not traditions, but innovations, to really almost worship angels and try to manifest them and treat them as if they're beings who are God in themselves. But the angels point us toward Christ. And if there's an angel that's not pointing us toward Christ, well, gotta watch out for that one. The whole life and purpose of the angelic powers is to praise God and to carry out his divine will. Angels are primarily messengers. That's what the name means. Angelos means, you can edit that part out. We're flubbering the Greek. But they're But they're messengers. They have no life or activity outside of the will of God. And the will of God primarily is the salvation of mankind and the sanctification of the created order. So there's an angelic economy that exists apart from, it's not like, science fiction or something like, I was thinking H.P. Lovecraft, but I don't know how relevant that is, but where there's like an independent life of these gods who are doing their own things and human beings are just caught up in the middle of it. Human beings are the center of God's creation, and the angelic powers are there to aid us in our salvation and union with God. God has ordered 9 ranks of angels. We don't need to get into all of that, but there's 9 ranks that are divided into 3 triads. You can read Dionysius the Areopagite on that, but probably don't. Like summer reading. Exactly. Yep. These ranks are set in order over the created world, over nations, over cities, and over individual Christians. And there's very clear biblical passages that talk about this, about the angel of Persia and the angel of the Greeks and the angel of Israel, who's the Archangel Michael. But then there's angels over each city. There's angels, like I said, the whole created order is filled with these beings. And there's also an angel over each individual Christian. And these are what we call our guardian angels. We receive these guardian angels at baptism. In Psalm 33, it says, "The angel of the Lord shall encamp round about them that fear him and shall deliver them." In one interpretation, the angel of the Lord here is speaking of Christ, the pre-incarnate Christ. However, St. Basil, there's different levels of interpretation that you can use. St. Basil says, this is a really encouraging word from St. Basil. He says, "Consider what the nature of the angel is. The one angel is compared to a whole army and a crowded encampment. So the greatness of him who guards you, the angel, through the greatness of him who guards you, the Lord bestows upon you an encampment. and through the strength of the angel, he surrounds you on all sides with his protection as with a wall. For this is what the word roundabout signifies. Just as the encircling walls put round about all cities keep off the attacks and enemies on all sides, so also the angel shields from the front and guards the rear and does not leave the two sides unprotected. So each guardian angel is like a whole city of, like a whole castle around each individual Christian, and the whole army that's around the walls. I mean, they're extremely powerful beings and ready to aid us. Angels are not here for our curiosity. They're not here for our entertainment, and certainly not for the fulfillment of our personal whims. They're here for our salvation. So we shouldn't seek out encounters with angelic beings. We should pray to them. We should ask for their help, but we shouldn't be, in one podcast it says, how can we permeate everyday life with spiritual presence? Well, the way that you do that is by praying to God and calling upon the angels in times of need. It's not by, asking for an angel to appear to you or something like that, because that is the way toward perdition. Yes, our aim is union with Christ, not spiritual experience. Angels also symbolize the true angel, which is Christ himself. In the Old Testament, the phrase angel of the Lord is used frequently. In Isaiah 9:5, the phrase angel of great counsel refers explicitly to the Messiah who was to come, which is Christ. In order to understand why we call Christ an angel in the Old Testament days, and even today, sometimes we still read the book of Isaiah. St. Anastasius of Sinai points to Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. Colossians 1:16 says, all things came into being through him and for him, being Christ. Both the things in heaven and the things on earth, the things visible and the things invisible, whether the thrones or the dominions, whether the principalities or powers, and these are all terms for angelic ranks, all things were created through him and for him. So St. Anastasius says that this passage teaches that the visible and invisible creations prefigure and came into prefigure Christ and prefigure the church. And it goes on to explain how each of the ranks of the angels not only minister to us on behalf of Christ, but also through their symbolic descriptions that we find in the scriptures and in our iconography, they prefigure the qualities that Christ fulfills. For example, the many-eyed nature of the cherubim. There's this meme online that's been around for way too long about biblically accurate angels, and they always look like these Lovecraftian nightmares. It's like, come on, that is not, no. The reason that cherubim are many-eyed is because it's not this creepy thing. It's to signify God's omniscience. It's a symbol of Christ's omniscience, how he looks upon each individual person. He's watching every single event in the universe is of great interest to God. And that is signified by the many-eyed nature of the cherubim. The fiery nature of the seraphim, this word seraphim means burning one, it signifies that God is a consuming fire. The God that so these angels all point above themselves and point toward Christ. And St. Anastasius goes really deep into the symbolism of the angels, but we won't get into all of it. So that's the angels. They're created, they're powerful, and they point us toward Christ. Now we go to the demons. But demonic, the demons are just angels. They're not something special. Their nature is not evil, like people say the Satan is the prince of darkness. But he was created as an angel. He was created, set in place over the terrestrial realm, St. John of Damascus says. He was created good. The devil was created good. He was created for a good purpose. The purpose was to draw all creation up toward union with God, just like the rest of the angels. There's no trace of evil within him when he was created. So the crucial point here is that the devil this isn't Zoroastrianism, this isn't Star Wars, there's not the light side and the dark side, there's only the light side and the ones who rebel against it. and the devil is the one who rebels against it. He's not an equal and opposite force to God. Evil has no existence. Evil has no substance. Evil is the privation of good, in the same way that darkness is the privation of light. When God created light, it doesn't say in Genesis, and then he created darkness. It says he separated the light from the darkness, because darkness is not something that's created. That doesn't mean it's uncreated like God. It just means it's not a thing. It's just air that hasn't been illumined. And similarly, when we say the devil is evil, we mean that he is a being who has deprived himself of the uncreated light. So evil is an act of the will away from the good. It's consciously willing something other than God and moving down toward non-being. When God brought the world out of non-being and into being, nothing existed. We call that non-being, and God brought it into being, and he said that it was good. So moving away from being toward non-being is what we call evil. And St. Gregory Palamas says that the devil seeks the destruction of the created order. He wants to divide this good that God brought into existence. He wants to tear it down. He's a rebel. He's a revolutionary. The Greek word diavolos, which means to throw apart, that's what the word. So diavolos is the Greek word that is translated as devil, and dia means like two, and volos means to throw. So, or valin, to throw. So he's throwing things into two and separating them and fracturing them, trying to bring this creation that God brought into being back into non-being. So evil is not a thing. It is metaphysical suicide. And this is the path that the devil chose for himself, along with the myriad of angels who followed him in his hopeless rebellion. I think we can get into that maybe in the Q&A if it comes up, about whether the angels can predict the future. Yeah. Talk about Mothman maybe if it comes up. An important point about the devil and the demons is that they cannot force us to sin. Angels were created in the divine image, and so were we. What that means is that we also have a free will, and we can choose either to move toward or away from the good, just like the angels did. St. John of Damascus says, and although they have been permitted to tempt humanity, they are not able to force anyone, for it rests with us to accept the temptation or to reject it. This doctrine is both encouraging and convicting, because it means on the one hand that we are not the playthings of the demons. They have no control over us. Our wills are completely free. We've heard of demonic possession, but that's usually at the end of a very long path toward non-being, which is why people who have demonic like Legion in the Bible, he's demonically possessed. He has no identity. He's a legion. He's many, but God created him as one. At the same time, however, it means that we are responsible for our own actions. We cannot, like Eve, place blame upon the serpent for our disobedience. We have the free choice, like the devil himself did, to move toward the good or reject and turn away from it. This is not to say that movement of the will always comes quickly or easily. Though we cannot be enslaved by the devil and his demons involuntarily, we sell ourselves to them all the time, just like the prodigal son who sold himself to a foreign master. This foreign master in the story of the prodigal son is the devil. And they're not good masters. They're terrible. So just, come to yourself like the prodigal son did. Raise your mind above the slop that the demons feed us and run back home to the Father. It can be done, but that doesn't mean it's easy. So I'm not saying it's, our wills are only free insofar as we allow them to be free. We'll dwell on this for a little bit, and then we'll go to Q&A. Are angels superior to human beings? This is an interesting question. While angels are made in the divine image, human beings are more so made in the divine image. Why is this? Well, this whole time it seems like we've been saying human beings are fleshly, so that means we're not as free and capable and powerful as angels. But it's actually the other way around. Far from our flesh being a hindrance for our becoming godlike, it is precisely in the fact that we have fleshly bodies that we possess the divine image more fully than the angels. Angels are spirits, but their spirit is not a life-giving spirit. It's a spirit that exists on its own. It doesn't give life to anything. But our spirit animates matter. It gives life to something that would otherwise be dead. And angels do not have this power. But it makes us more in the image of God because God gives life. God is the giver of life. And we are made in the image of the giver of life. Angels are not made in the image of God in that they are the giver of life. They don't give life to anything. Another aspect of this is the unique human ability to reproduce the image of God, spirit and flesh, by creating children. Angels don't reproduce. Human beings can reproduce, and in that fact, we are more like God than them. However, in the fall, our capacity to actualize the image and become like God has been disrupted. So, in this world, before the end of times, when the sons of God are glorified, when we become saints, the angels, for now, are our superiors because their image is more actualized than ours. We're still fallen. We're still subject to the passions, but the angels are not. At least not the ones that are, at least not the good angels, But St. Paul himself says that the saints will judge angels. He says this in, I think, 1 Corinthians. I didn't write it down. Anyway, the saints will judge the angels. They are here to serve us. And it is for this reason, the superiority of the compound nature of man, spirit and flesh, that the devil and his angels seek our destruction. They're envious. They don't like that we have this power. The hymn that we sing to the Theotokos, more honorable than the cherubim and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim, we sing this to Mary. This is unique. This is true of her uniquely, especially right now, because she is the only fully glorified and deified human being other than Christ. Because she is already raised bodily, she's already in the eschaton. But Mary is our mother. And because of that, it means that we have this inheritance as well. To become more glorious beyond, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Now, any questions?